She doesn't want a wise man. She wants a man she can beat at the emotional game. That's the truth nobody tells you. Not your parents, not your friends, especially not her. Because a wise man sees through the script, and she can't play a role in front of someone who's already read the ending. That's why women chase mystery, but flee from insight. Why they romanticize the wolf, but exile the philosopher. Why intelligence in a man feels like a threat, not a gift. Plato saw this long ago in his cave filled with shadows. The man who escapes and sees the light is not celebrated. He's hated, mocked, rejected, because light burns, and she's built her kingdom in the dark. So imagine this, a serpent, not whispering temptation, but truth, cold, clinical, unmasking. He slithers close, not to seduce, but to reveal. She doesn't run because she's scared of him. She runs because he reflects everything she pretends not to be. Let's ask a dangerous question. What if the reason she left wasn't because you weren't enough, but because you were too aware? She didn't ghost you because you were boring. She ghosted you because your presence whispered something more terrifying than rejection. Clarity. And clarity to the modern woman feels like death because it strips away the power of illusion. Let's cut deeper. Most modern women aren't looking for love. They're looking for leverage. Love, real love, is vulnerable, uneven. It demands surrender. But leverage lets her play God with a smile. She wants emotional chaos where she wins by crying harder. She wants intellectual smokescreens where she redefines betrayal. She wants a man strong enough to fight, but never strong enough to see through her tactics. A wise man breaks this system. He doesn't get lost in the emotional fog. He doesn't chase after breadcrumbs. He doesn't apologize for noticing the patterns. Instead, he watches, he listens, and worst of all, he understands. Imagine a woman who's mastered her world. Instagram-filtered perfection, feminist talking points polished like pearls, hypergamous instincts sharpened by TikTok therapy jargon. She's stunning, confident, empowered. But then, a man enters the room. Not a high-value alpha, not a provider, a thinker, a man who listens more than he speaks, who isn't dazzled by her sexuality, who's not there to win her, but to read her. And that terrifies her, because he's not playing the game. He's studying the board. He doesn't flinch when she withdraws affection. He doesn't crumble when she tests his patience. He doesn't dance when she waves attention. He waits, like a mirror she didn't ask for, one that shows her not just what she is, but what she's been hiding. And suddenly the empowered woman panics. He's not in love. He's awake. In Plato's allegory of the cave, prisoners are chained facing a wall. All they see are shadows, cast by firelight behind them. The shadows become their truth. One day, a prisoner escapes. He sees the fire, then the sun. He understands. He returns to the cave, thinking he will liberate the others. But instead, they kill him, because the truth hurts more than the lie comforts. Now, fast forward 2,400 years. Most modern dating is just Plato's cave, wrapped in Tinder aesthetics and Instagram filters. Shadows of connection, echoes of intimacy. And when one man escapes, when he starts asking questions, starts seeing patterns, he doesn't get applause. He gets punished. She said I was too intense. She said I think too much. She said I was emotionally unavailable. No, my friend, you weren't unavailable. You were uncontrollable. And she couldn't handle that. He was 35, a philosopher by instinct, an engineer by trade. No dating apps, no games, just curiosity, depth, and a discomforting calmness. He met her at a gallery. She was all things loud and alive. Red lips, fast opinions, a laugh that hijacked the room. She was drawn to his silence. First week, she said, "You make me feel like you already know me." Third week, "Why do I feel like you're always watching?" By the second month, she vanished without a word. Months later, a mutual friend let it slip. She said being with you was like being seen naked all the time, like nothing she did would impress you, because you already saw what was behind it. Let's make this brutally simple. A wise man dismantles her psychological survival system. She didn't build her manipulation consciously, she learned it. Over time, through rejection, praise, reward, punishment, from fathers who weren't present, from men who drooled at her smile but never saw her soul. So she built armor, beauty, drama, control, not as weapons, but as shields. But the wise man, he doesn't fight her. He sees through her. And that's worse, because now she's exposed. And nothing terrifies the mask more than being irrelevant. So when you sit there wondering, why did she leave when I was so thoughtful, so calm, so real? Understand this, you weren't discarded because you lacked value. You were exiled because your value was unusable in her game. She didn't reject you, she rejected her reflection in you. She smiled at your intelligence, but she married the man who never read a book. Why? Because knowledge, true, self-possessed knowledge, doesn't just illuminate. It confronts, it strips the room of its socially accepted lies. And when a man walks into a relationship carrying truth instead of flattery, he doesn't ignite comfort, he triggers alarms. This is the paradox no dating coach will admit. A woman will claim she wants a man who understands her. But when she meets one who sees through her, sees behind her curated independence, her Instagram righteousness, her emotionally bulletproof mask, she recoils. Not because he's wrong, but because he's terrifyingly right. You see, Plato warned us. In his allegory of the cave, the man who escapes the shadows and returns to enlighten others isn't celebrated. He's hated, mocked, even killed. Modern dating is no different. The man who's wise, not manipulative, not performative, but inwardly illuminated, becomes a mirror. And people hate mirrors when they're not ready to see what they've become. Women today are taught to want power, to chase independence, to own their narratives. But there's an inconvenient truth hidden beneath empowerment. True wisdom in a man doesn't amplify her story, it edits it. He notices the contradiction between her feminism and her thirst for traditional security. He sees how her independence is often a fortress built from past betrayals. He doesn't condemn it, he understands it, and that's what makes him unbearable. A fool can be dismissed, a brute can be explained away, but a man who gets it, he must be avoided. Because if she lets him close, he'll force her to choose authenticity or performance. Freud might call this resistance, the psyche defending itself from trauma exposure. But let's be blunt, it's ego preservation. The modern woman has built her entire identity on narratives that allow her to stay simultaneously victimized and victorious. And the wise man is a threat to that contradiction. He's not trying to fix her, he simply won't play the game. And that, ironically, makes him the most dangerous man in the room. Let's take it deeper. Think of Odysseus. He outsmarts gods, monsters, and men. But in modern society, he wouldn't get the girl. He'd be ghosted for being too intense, too introspective, too unavailable. Why? Because wisdom doesn't chase, it observes. And most women don't want to be observed. They want to be desired, even at the cost of being misunderstood. The modern dating marketplace runs on illusions. Men flex their status, women flaunt their desirability. Swipe culture isn't built on depth, it's built on dopamine. But a wise man doesn't perform. He questions, he reframes, he resists the script, which means he's a glitch in the system. Imagine this, a woman sits across from a man who doesn't compliment her beauty, but instead asks, "What do you fear when you're alone?" Not as a tactic, but because he actually wants to know. She's never been seen like that, not truly, and so she leaves. Not because he was wrong, but because he was right too soon. Carl Jung said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." A wise man unintentionally becomes the confrontation she never asked for, and instead of gratitude, she offers distance, sometimes disdain. Worse, she might project onto him, label him emotionally unavailable, narcissistic, or toxic. Not because he is, but because naming him wrong is easier than admitting he triggered a truth she couldn't digest. Here's a darker angle. Most women don't want a man who has mastered himself. They want a man they can influence. Not because they're malicious, but because control feels like safety. And a wise man is immune to control. He doesn't chase validation. He doesn't mold himself to her expectations. He doesn't need her to feel complete, and so she feels unnecessary, replaceable, irrelevant. And that kind of irrelevance burns more than rejection. Nietzsche once warned, whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster. But in today's emotional battleground, the wise man is the monster, because his refusal to play along is mistaken for superiority, his insight mistaken for judgment, his inner stillness mistaken for coldness. Yet here's the cruel twist. These same women, years later, will call that man the one that got away. Not because he was perfect, but because he was real. And real is rare. Real doesn't flatter. Real exposes. By then, of course, it's too late. The carousel has stopped spinning, the illusions have lost their shine, and the woman who once said he was too much now stares at a man who's too little, too compliant, too eager, too easy. But the wise man? He's already gone, not bitter, not broken, just elsewhere. You see, wisdom doesn't beg to be understood. It waits and watches. She said she left because it didn't feel right. But what she really meant was, it felt too real. When a man is truly wise, not performatively spiritual, not a self-help puppet, but soul-carved by pain, loss, and brutal self-inquiry, he doesn't feel like a fantasy. He feels like Judgment Day. And that, to most women, is intolerable. Because here's a truth that rattles the modern ego. A wise man doesn't just love you, he sees you. Not the curated version, not the trauma-forged persona, not the woman built from TikTok mantras and feminist defenses, but the raw, inconvenient, screaming self beneath all that. And being seen like that, it feels like death. Why? Because in a culture that worships validation and demands constant praise, nothing is more terrifying than a gaze that doesn't need to worship you. A wise man doesn't need her curves to feel powerful. He doesn't need her chaos to feel needed. He doesn't even need her love to feel whole. And that breaks the ancient contract most women never admit exists. I offer beauty, emotion, and drama. You offer control, attention, and purpose. But the wise man has already destroyed that contract with himself. He's gone beyond need. He's kissed loneliness in the dark and come out married to silence. He's faced his inner tyrants, slain the ego, buried the approval-seeking boy. He doesn't crave chaos anymore. He studies it. And when she tries to ignite the old games, jealousy, withdrawal, silence, he doesn't chase. He smiles because he knows exactly what's happening. That smile is the dagger, because suddenly she's not the one with power. And modern women, conditioned to believe that romantic leverage is survival, crumble in the face of a man they can't shake, manipulate, or decode. Let's be brutal. Most women don't want love. They want control, wrapped in the illusion of love. They want a man who will kneel to their unpredictability, justify their emotional storms, and thank them for the chance to suffer. But the wise man doesn't kneel. He watches. And the moment he watches without wanting, she feels naked. Not sexually, existentially. Her defenses don't work. Her dramatics don't move him. Her beauty doesn't distract him. Her independence doesn't impress him. He sees the abandoned little girl inside, begging not to be judged. And for 1 second, she wants to be held by that clarity. But then, panic. Because to be held like that means admitting, I've been performing my whole life, and most people would rather die than admit that. This is the agony of encountering the man who's already done his inner work. He becomes a mirror that doesn't lie, and mirrors that don't lie shatter illusions. Freud once said, most people do not really want freedom because freedom involves responsibility. Similarly, most women don't want a man who's free, because a free man can't be possessed. And possession feels like love to the modern mind. If he doesn't suffer for me, he must not care. If he doesn't chase me when I pull away, he must not love me. If he can live without me, he must never have needed me. They don't realize that the man who can walk away but chooses to stay is the rarest kind of loyalty. But that nuance requires maturity, and maturity is rare in a world that rewards performance over introspection. So, what happens? The woman leaves, not to find better, but to return to comfortably broken men. Men who orbit her, men she can shape, men who fear losing her more than they love truth. And yet, somewhere deep in the night, when the world is quiet, she remembers him. The one who didn't beg, the one who didn't flinch, the one who listened and didn't react. She hated how he made her feel, exposed, accountable, human. But she'll never forget him, because deep down she knows that was the closest she ever came to something real. This is the haunting tragedy. Women don't avoid wise men because they're boring. They avoid them because wisdom feels like judgment and they're not ready to be judged. A fool flatters, a brute intimidates, but a wise man reveals. And in a world built on filters, edits, and illusions, reality is the ultimate threat. She married the man who texts back fast, who says you're right even when she's not, who watches reality shows with a numb smile, laughs on cue, and asks no threatening questions. She told herself, this is peace. But peace without depth is sedation. And sedation doesn't last, because even in the soft, cushioned comfort of predictable love, something still screams at 3 a.m. That scream isn't loneliness. It's the ghost of the man who didn't lie. The wise man, the one who saw her entirely. Not just as a body or role or story, but as a soul stumbling through this chaotic, sacred mess called life. She won't admit it, but she's haunted, not by what he did, but by what he refused to do. He refused to be fooled. He refused to accept surface-level charm as truth. He refused to participate in the unspoken game. Validate me or I'll call you cold. Worship me or I'll call you abusive. Chase me or I'll call you weak. He didn't chase. He didn't kneel. He simply stood, clear, unmoved, and made her choose. And in a society addicted to options, nothing is more threatening than the demand to choose clearly. Because clarity is commitment, and commitment is exposure. And exposure reveals how unprepared most people are for love that isn't rooted in need. Kierkegaard once said, "The greatest hazard of all, losing oneself, can occur very quietly in the world, as if it were nothing at all." That's what happens in most modern relationships. They don't explode, they dissolve under the weight of performance, under the unbearable pressure of pretending everything's okay, under the lie that soft love is always good, even when it kills your soul. She thought she wanted a man who listened, but when he really listened, without flinching, without filling in the gaps, without trying to fix her, she called him cold. She thought she wanted a man who understood emotions. But when he saw through hers and calmly named them, she said he was controlling. She thought she wanted growth. But when he held up the mirror and asked, "Who are you behind all that pain?" she screamed, "Don't gaslight me." Because growth isn't glamorous. It's grief. It's stripping away everything false. It's facing the fact that maybe, just maybe, you're not the victim you've always claimed to be. And that kind of confrontation is spiritual war. That's what the wise man brings. Not peace, not chaos, but truth. And truth is lonely. Truth is offensive. Truth costs everything you built on a lie, which is why he's always left. Admired, but unloved. Remembered, but never chosen. Because most women, like most men, aren't looking for truth. They're looking for affirmation. But here's the tragedy. The longer you run from the truth teller, the louder the lie becomes, until you can't even tell what was real anymore. She'll tell her friends he was emotionally unavailable. She'll post breakup quotes about outgrowing toxicity. She'll build her narrative. She'll play the heroine. But at night, when all the mantras fade and the wine wears off and the therapist's voice becomes a blur, she'll remember how he looked at her, not with lust, not with pity, but with knowing. That look is a curse, because once you've been truly seen, you can never unsee yourself. Even if the world keeps applauding the lie you wear, even if 1,000 safe men line up to adore your curated mask, something in you knows you left the only one who didn't want the mask. He wanted you, and you weren't ready. But here's the cruel beauty of the wise man. He doesn't wait, he doesn't cling, he walks, because he knows if he stays where he's not met, he becomes a fool too. Plato once wrote that the wise must rule, but the masses hate being ruled. In relationships, the same dynamic plays out. The wise man offers sovereignty through truth, but the average partner wants comfort through illusion, and so they exile him. Every time, until one day someone is brave enough not just to want to be loved, but to want to be transformed. And when that happens, the wise man won't just be feared, he'll be followed. But until then, he walks alone. Not bitter, not broken, just awake. And in a world built on dreams, nothing is more terrifying than a man who's already woken up.